Hi and welcome. It's Candid Talk again. My name is Adelle as always. Always excited to be here to give you something back that you can learn from, but also to add value to your life. Today we are talking about something very sensitive, but who cares? We are Candid Talk with Adelle. So let's get started. We'll be talking about domestic violence. If you're interested in hearing more about this, please keep watching and subscribe in the meantime. I'll be back with a very, very special guest. Hi, lovely Mercy.
Hello, it's a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure.
And this specifically is public demand.
Thank you, fans of Candid Talks with Adelle, for
That is really
asking me
impact.
to come back. Yes.
This is public demand. The conversations we had before on marriage, on divorce, writing a will, I think that was one of the most popular ones.
Yes.
So everyone was saying, bring Mercy back.
Yes.
And they had specific questions. Now, today, we'll start with domestic violence.
Yes.
It's a very sensitive topic to many, but it's been happening a lot. And majority of the people that are facing this, possibly we can look at the examples. Nigeria,
Yeah.
that popular musician, in the
Yes.
church,
Yes.
seated quietly, and the story comes out, she's dead, domestic violence. Popular scenarios here which you can't mention by name, but it's happening, and some are quiet. Mercy, what is this domestic violence? Under the law, what is this domestic violence?
So domestic violence, just to make it simple and for those who may want to understand it in depth, because I know that everybody conceives it in different ways. So it's really an act or an omission that injures or threatens to injure the life, the health, and the security and well-being of another. So just by that definition itself, you know that it's either the act has been committed or that somebody is threatening to commit it against another person. So it's not just the fact that somebody has done something, but even the threat to do something in itself is violence.
Because that makes me think twice then. Is domestic violence only physical? Because that's where we need to get to.
Yeah.
We are somewhere quiet thinking, if I'm not physically assaulted, it's okay.
Yeah.
Is it only physical?
Not really, and that's the misconception that people get about domestic violence. When we speak about domestic violence, people really, first of all, think that it is just something between a husband and a wife. It is not, far beyond that.
Okay.
So domestic, at least in the context of the Ugandan law, is not just about family, that husband
Not
and
just
wife.
husband and wife.
It's also you and the persons that you employ who are within the domestic settings as well. So like your domestic workers, the people who live with you in your home and share the same home space with you, who may not necessarily be married to you, but also in places of work, because we spend more time in places of work than we do in our homes. So many cases that I've been part of before, workspaces have been also demarcated to mean a domestic space. And so I just needed to clear that before I answer the question that you've asked, that is it just physical? I think because physical is normally the most predominant and the most obvious form of domestic violence, people believe that domestic violence is just physical in nature. But domestic violence takes different forms. Of course, the physical is the act of, physically assaulting somebody using an object, using a hand, punching, kicking, hitting them with objects and causing physical injury to the body of the other. But beyond that, we have economic violence as well, which is, withholding economic or financial
money.
No, it doesn't matter, but as long as this person is entitled to that money or that financial benefit and you withhold it from them, that is a form of violence. So even not paying rent for your family, or withholding, or stopping somebody from accessing resources that would otherwise mean everything for their livelihood, in itself is violence. And of course, emotional stroke psychological violence, which does not take a physical form or any form, but for it, it is more of, insults, words that are hurled at a person, demeaning actions against a person. A person may not physically beat you, but the words they say can beat you. And I think for me, this is one of the most dangerous and the most deeply rooted forms of abuse. That is
depression.
Exactly, that is
issues.
often overlooked.
Yes.
I've dealt with clients who have run mad, you know, not because of anything, but because psychological torture, and by the nature of it, the fact that it affects your mind, it has, you know, very, very far-reaching implications on the person. Of course, sexual violence as well, which takes different shapes. So that means, you know, first of all, sexually harassing to perform a sexual act with a person, but also sexually performing this act with a person within a domestic space against their will, because with sex and intimacy, will and acceptance is very core. And so where I solicit your interest by use of threats, or I do it against your will, regardless of what our relationship is with you, that in itself constitutes domestic violence. Yes.
And under the laws of Uganda, how does it sit? What is a person supposed to know about the legalities around it? Because most of us just know domestic violence exists.
Yes.
We don't know that actually there are repercussions that can come out of it if properly reported and investigated.
Domestic violence, the fact that domestic violence has been codified in a law, the Domestic Violence Act, which was passed in 2010. This is one of the most progressive laws we have because it is one of those laws that contains only everything to do with, you know, domestic violence. But also, it's not just about what domestic violence is and what constitutes domestic violence, but within this law, unlike many laws, it prescribes or gives guidance in terms of what a person can do, the steps a person can take to get redress, but also it does spell out different responsibilities of different lawful agencies in terms of what they can do to support survivors of domestic violence. And of course, as people that subscribe to this law, and I believe in very many jurisdictions it may not be very different from ours, is that within the Domestic Violence Act, first of all, you have an opportunity to report and get redress. And there are different mechanisms for reporting. You can go to your LC1, you can go to civil society organizations. Many of them do domestic violence response. You can go to police. There is a whole child and family protection unit that handles that. There are also domestic violence shelters all across this country where you can go if you need protection, for example, and you cannot stay in the same confines with your abuser. You're able to go to these domestic violence shelters. They're run by both Ministry of Gender and civil society organizations. And there are different opportunities for you to get redress. Part of it is that the person, the perpetrator, can be imprisoned. You can also be entitled to a fine where court determines so. There can also be caution, and the person can be asked to apologize as well. And also you can be reinstated, especially where as a result of the violence, perhaps you have, you know, been...
Compensation of sorts.
Exactly, compensation, where there have been, you know, injuries to health. So you are able to, you know, receive some, you know, compensation. That person can be subjected to community service, but also as a survivor, you have the right to determine what kind of punishment your perpetrator can be subjected to. That is the beauty about this law, unlike many.
It's so detailed
that
you can actually, if you're interested in getting redress, you can get this redress.
Yes.
And the beauty about it is that you don't have to tell someone. You can just walk straight to the institution that you want help from, and you'll get that help.
Exactly. Maybe
to make it clear to the people who are watching Mercy, domestic violence not only for women,
but men as well.
But also men have been facing so many of these things from lockdown.
Definitely.
There are so many cases that men came out to say, we are being violated. But most of the time, it is stigmatized.
Yeah, definitely. And even the law we're talking about is neutral. Both men and women. The law does not just speak about women or does not exist to only protect women. That's also a huge misconception that people have about the law on domestic violence. Domestic violence in itself can happen to anybody. It can happen to men, women, girls, boys, you know. But many times, of course, the greater majority is women. And that does not negate the fact that men also suffer domestic violence, just that because of the stigma around domestic violence, so men fear to come out to report. And even when they do, sometimes they land on people, for example, law enforcement officers, who have patriarchal mindsets, who believe that a man cannot be, so they will they will question you and perhaps discourage you from pursuing. Yes.
That your woman has beaten you.
Yes. What were you doing? You know. Yes, but
and those are the things that we need to talk about.
Yes.
There's no reason why any gender, man or woman, should be faced or should be cocooned in that kind of environment.
Yes.
It's not healthy at all.
Not at all.
I think also, as we bring this to a conclusion, why do most victims, in your opinion, try to come out to the public or to even go to report these cases?
Many times it's, first of all, because we live in a very patriarchal society. So a lot of how we function has to do with power. And this power is derived from very many things. And marriage is one of those things. I can tell you, Adele, if you were in the same room with a woman who is not married, you will feel more powerful than the woman subconsciously. And now, because there is a lot of power attached to some of these institutions, you find that people who find themselves in abusive relationships fear to lose that value in the eyes of society. For example, me losing my marriage because of violence, what are people going to think about me? The other dimension of power is money. So the person that has money is the one that has the power. And so many times in relationships of abusive nature, there's one party who has more power, and it can be financial resources. So when the one who is abused is the one with lesser power, they will find it usually difficult to walk away, because how do I move away from here, and how will I sustain myself?
Where do I start from is the question that comes out
exactly.
most.
And many times the abusers use this as a bait to keep their survivors or their victims in a situation where they are, you know, they cannot speak anymore. And the circle of violence works in a way that many times the abused, first of all, is deprived of their rights. For example, even affection in a marriage, somebody, you know, buying you presents and whatever, you don't get to see those. You see mostly the violence. So what the abusers do is that once they abuse you, they will sprinkle some sort of affection, so he will come back and say, I'm sorry. He'll bring you flowers. He'll do all of these beautiful things. And then all of a sudden, because of the excitement, you imagine that he's going to change, and then you'll stay. And we've seen this recently. But many times I don't blame the women. I don't blame the people in abusive relationships who come out to defend. I know that they need help, and we must help them. And we must shove it down their throats. If you are a family member, if you are a friend to such a person, do everything in your power to get them out of the abusive situation. Even if I know that many times when they start to support the abuser, many of us who are willing to support them will say, you know what, I think we're wasting our time, let us give up.
Give up.
But we shouldn't, because there's nothing good about violence. Violence is violence. And I think what we must condemn is violence, because violence has the ability to take one's life. Violence has the ability to compromise your self-esteem. Violence has the ability to compromise your ability to grow in your career, in your finances, and in whichever way. Your mental health is core. And I'll just tell you this story, Adele. I had a client before, and she was married with 3 children, and I was helping her with her divorce case. And she was seeking divorce because she was in an abusive relationship. And I remember I did tell her, first we'll have to get you out of that abusive place, and you go and stay with your relative or sister until we sort out issues of custody of children and all the other things. And the sister indeed agreed to accommodate her. And one of those days she sneaked from there to go to her home, I think because she was thinking about her children. And somehow a fight erupted, and the gentleman hit her and she died. And she died in the presence of her children. And now the man is in prison, the woman is dead, the children watch this violence happen. And I did not know, I found out on a newspaper. I was really broken. And I mean, it took me a long time to forgive her, because I kept thinking we could have avoided this. Yeah, so many times this is what violence does. That whereas you may say, I'm staying for the children, you're doing a disservice, because what those children witnessed has a permanent dent on their mind.
Not
they
even
grow,
that. I think even themselves,
yes,
they'll grow up thinking it's okay,
it's okay
to be in that position.
Yes.
And that's what we have to change as
Yes.
this generation.
Yes, so there's no point in, I know how difficult it is to walk out of a relationship, but think about yourself, think about your children. You don't do them a favor by staying in an abusive relationship. Nobody out here cares about whether or not you're married. They may pretend to care, but what you go through in your home, we do not know.
And we don't
So
care.
if you cannot take it, walk out. Put
Simple.
yourself first. You are better than anybody else. The world deserves the best version of you. There is always people out there willing to treat you right, to love you in the right way. Love is not violence at all. So pick up the courage and think about yourself. Think about the fact that this one day you're choosing to stay could be the day you lose your life. So we shouldn't in any way tolerate abuse in any form.
1 Corinthians is very clear.
Yeah.
Love is kind.
Yeah.
No one should deceive you that if they don't beat you, they don't love you. If
Yeah.
they are abusive to you economically,
Yes.
or even for any reason,
Yeah.
someone is just emotionally abusing you, you have no reason.
Yeah.
You have no reason to stay in that place. Things like counseling
Yes.
is something they can do.
Yes, sure. It's one of the areas of redress. Even within the law, if somebody needs psychosocial support, they are able to receive it. But also, like I said, civil society organizations, churches, the domestic violence shelters have psychosocial support systems. We have one in Boise, which is run by ActionAid Uganda and Ministry of Gender. You can go there and get psychosocial support. Uganet also does have a shelter in Kampala, which you can go to seek help, just seek help and seek advice, seek counseling. And sometimes the psychosocial support may be what you need to give you the confidence to walk away. So that's not something that you should shy away from. But also you can comment on this post or reach out to us, and we can be able to, speak to you and support you with your psychosocial needs if you need that.
True. And just to let you know, everyone that is watching, that police has a department fully fledged for these kind of cases, and we'll leave the number on the screen. If you really want to reach out to them without going through the corners, we leave you the number on the screen. You'll be able to contact them if you need any assistance. But please, just like Mercy said, don't stay there. Know when it's enough and move out. We are seated at Eliana Hotel in Ntinda. If you want to see what they are, the rooftop is beautiful. Do visit them and see the services that they do have. We'll see you shortly in the next episode.